Hi, I'm Marianne Crockford. Welcome to the first episode of the Promised Land podcast. I'm here with Frank Gargiulo, author of the book Your New Beginning, a hope-filled guide to living out your purpose and reaching your promised land, available now on Amazon. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Marianne, great to be here with everyone.
Nice to be with you as well. So, Frank, tell us about this book, Your New Beginning. What does that mean to you?
Well, the title Your New Beginning was really important to me because I really believe in new beginnings for myself and for others. And so I wanted to put that message out to the world.
And really, it's a message we all need right now. We're going through difficult
Absolutely.
times, a lot of adjustments, and a lot of people are asking themselves, okay, what do I do now? And they're
Right.
wondering if there's still time and opportunities to have the life that they really want.
Yeah, right. And the book is an outline to help people work through that, to realize that they can have a new beginning. Throughout the book, I share about my life story and share some success principles to help them reach their promised land. It's about a hope-filled guide to living out your purpose and reaching your promised land.
So when you say promised land, that makes me think maybe it's a Bible study. Is that what it is, or is it more?
Well, I think it's kind of like a fun way to metaphor the Israelite story. Everyone wants to reach their promised land. Everyone wants a new beginning and live the life that they were intended to live. That's kind of where that came about. And it's kind of a fun thing to do, right?
Yeah.
I know, like I shared with you, it teaches success principles. So in the number one thing when you're in the study of success principles, you want to create a vision for your life. Mm-hmm. So I thought we could make it fun where it could be a vision to reach your promised land.
So when you say success principles, that makes me think of Jack Canfield's book. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and Jack Canfield was really a mentor for me, and I love that book. And actually, that's where I found my life purpose. There's an exercise in the book where you use your gifts and how could you serve the world and others.
Right.
And so
He asks people, what were you put on earth to do?
And you do this little exercise. And after I got done with the exercise, I realized my purpose was to use my encouragement and enthusiasm to help others live the life that God intended for them. And so that was kind of the start of all this, the basis of this book, and then my journey of going deeper into the success principles, but most importantly then using my faith in God and my relationship with God and intertwining it with the success principles, my life story, the Israelite story, the journey out of Egypt. And it's a great metaphor because it shows is that God is guiding them through freedom towards a promised land, supplies their needs and gives them their riches and clothes them. And they're being blessed. And what was the first thing they did?
Complain.
Complain, right? They complain because
We all do
when
that.
life gets hard, they started complaining. So I think we all do that.
Absolutely.
So what the book is about is to start to become aware of that and to shift the mindset from looking at circumstances and complaining about it to a mindset of Caleb and Joshua. So that's kind of the metaphor that I use for the Israelites in this book, along with my life story, along with the success principles, and along with my relationship with God.
Speaking of your life story, can you give us just a brief background to what led you to write this book?
Yeah, so I share about horses in this book, and when I was young, 12 years old, I fell in love with horses, and I worked with horses since then. And through my teenage life, I used to have these big dreams that I would someday go to Kentucky, right, and meet the professional horsemen. And at that time, Red Crabtree was a really good horseman. He was a trainer of American saddlebred horses, and he was riding the world champion 5-gaited horse, Will Shriver. So I mention this because it's very important later on in our podcast, in the stories, and in the book, how that really affected my life. And another horse that was really something that changed my life was Secretariat, and the story of Penny Chenry. So back in 1973, Time magazine called him the super horse of all time, one of the greatest horses ever. He actually, when he died, his heart was twice the size of an average horse. So he was really a wonderful horse. And so he's used in the book, along with Penny Chenry's mindset on how to live a life and to become bigger than you were intended to be.
So when I think of Secretariat, even people outside the horse world, like me, I'm not part of the horse world, but I know who Secretariat
Right.
is. He's really a symbol of endurance. So Tell us a little bit more about why Secretariat was so inspirational for you. You mentioned his big heart. What
Right.
else?
Right. So I want to share with you what my turning point was and how my life really turned to a new beginning. In my younger years, I went to college, graduated from college, and then I went to horseshoeing school in Kentucky. And I fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with the horses, and I thought someday I'm going to live here. That was my big dream. Well, I came back to New York, started the horseshoeing business, and circumstances got in the way from me ever achieving my dream to live in Kentucky. So, I was 20 years old. Well, fast forward, I'm now 49 years old. I'm living in New York on a very nice horse farm, but it wasn't my dream. And I was working, very hard. At that time, I was a realtor in 2008. The market crashed, and it was tough going for many years.
Absolutely.
So, it's now 2012, and I'm very dissatisfied living on my farm in New York because it wasn't my dream.
Was there something missing? Because that sounds like you achieved your dream, but obviously it hadn't yet become your sole focus.
Well, yeah, so what was missing was that I wasn't living the dream. I was living a dream, right? I was on a horse farm, but it wasn't the dream. And what I did throughout my whole life, and we all do this, is we allow circumstance to dictate what we're going to do next. So I had this desire in my heart to go to Kentucky. However, I never got there. So it was mid-February.
So this horse farm was still in New York,
Yes,
where you grew up?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
So it was mid-February. It was really a cold night. I had just come up from feeding the horses into the house, and the movie Secretariat was on. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I just love this movie, right? So I sat down and watched it.
How many times had you watched that movie?
I would say 3 or 4 times. Yeah. And so I was watching it, and there was one scene that I was riveted watching her, and that was when the brother comes to her and says, this horse is increasing in value. He's becoming a great racehorse. We can sell him for enough money to pay off the debt of our father's farm and then move on with their lives. And she looked at him, she said, no, life is not about going backwards. Life is about it being ahead of you, and you run at it, and you keep running because you never know how far you can run until you run. And when I heard those words, I was like, that's it. I am going to run to Kentucky.
That was what you call an aha moment.
Yeah,
for
that
you.
was my decision that changed my life completely. Nothing is going to stop me this time. And I was determined. And I had this new energy of life to this is what I'm going to do.
So did you move to Kentucky that next week?
Well, I put the wheels in motion is what I did. So what I did was I called my very good friend Kevin and Betsy, who the only people I knew who lived in Kentucky. And I said, I'm moving to Kentucky. Can I come down and rent a room from you? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you down here. So what I did, I took a brave step. I put my farm on the market. It sold within a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it was everything started to line up from that one decision. And so I packed my horse, packed my cat, and I headed to Kentucky. And I had no job. I had let go of my job as a realtor. And I just knew that things were going to work out because I was just determined that they would. So here's the great thing about this. So I get to Kentucky, and they live in Paris, Kentucky. At that time, I had no clue where Paris, Kentucky was. But it was actually in the heart of the bluegrass, and it was actually where Secretariat stood for many years at the famous Claiborne Farm.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, right? I get there the same weekend that the Secretariat Festival is going on in Paris, Kentucky. So I attended with my friend Betsy and Kevin. And at that year, Penny Chenry, her groom, and her jockey were actually attending the festival. And we got to meet them in person. It was wonderful. I was like, this is amazing. I went on one of the tours to the Claiborne Farm. I saw where Secretariat, stood in his stall. I saw his grave site. It was just really like, oh my gosh, this is awesome.
Wow. So all that from one decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Open the doors, right? And then doors continued to open. Within a week or two, I got a really wonderful job working for Lucas Equine Equipment, and they manufacture the nicest stalls in the world, high quality. So it was a blessing. And so doors started to open up. I was actually able to purchase 5 acres of land in Paris, Kentucky, and I started my dream farm. So when I was a 20-year-old man, my dream was to have this barn with a cupola. I know this is crazy, but it's important to me. A cupola with a copper roof.
Those classic little roofs you see on postcards with like a bell
Right,
over a
or
barn.
weather vane, yeah.
Right.
So that was my dream, and so I started, and that all came together, right? And I was actually able to build a carriage house where the horses live underneath, and I live on top, and it has a cupola with a copper roof.
Wow.
So my dreams, started happening really quickly.
Everything came full circle.
Yeah, it came full circle, right? And I was like really fast. So what I realized though in this whole process is that I was living my dream and I was very happy, but there was something missing deep down
Something
that I
was
was
still
still longing for more.
How did you discover what that missing piece was? Did it take you a while, or did that happen quickly too?
No, I started reading the book Success Principles in Jack Canfield.
This was when you were still in your 20s.
No, that was just recently.
Oh, okay. After you came to Kentucky.
Yeah, when I was younger, I went to a Power of Positive Thinking course, and that was really, those success principles, I really love that kind of thing.
I see, okay.
But so now it's coming full circle. I have my dream, and still something's missing, so I started reading the success principles.
Okay.
And in there, like I was sharing earlier, is that we talk about finding your purpose. And my purpose was to use my enthusiasm and encouragement to help people live the life that God intended for them. So that's where the idea of writing this book came about. So, and also I wanted to incorporate my faith in God. So there was, throughout my journey from a young man to living in Kentucky, there was times where, God had really intervened in my life.
Sure.
I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I'm an Italian. So I had an idea who God was and who Jesus was, but I just didn't really have the full relationship and the power and the awesomeness of God, and also the renewness and the new beginning through Jesus Christ. So when I was a 23-year-old man, after I went to horseshoeing school, I was shoeing a horse and he fell on top of me and broke my leg.
Wow.
Yeah, and so what happened was I had a blood embolism. So they rushed me to the hospital, and what a blood embolism is that the bone marrow from my leg went into my lungs and was coagulating, and it could actually cause a heart attack and, cause me to die as a young man. And so at that time, I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I remember sharing with my mom, saying, "Mom, there's something seriously wrong with me." She said, "You're going to be okay." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I feel like my spirit wants to leave my body." And so in that process, I'm thinking, the power of positive thinking is not going to heal this, Frank. But deep down, I realized God could. And I really believed it. And I kind of fell asleep on the belief of that. Like 20 minutes later, I woke up and I actually felt this presence hit me right in the chest really hard. And then I felt this warm breeze blow over me. And I knew something supernatural just happened, and I knew that God was intervening. So there was a journey, from the 23-year-old man to the man who is now living in Kentucky. God had shown himself faithful to me throughout my whole entire life.
Right.
And circumstances happen, right? And things weren't always the greatest, but God always came to my rescue.
Absolutely.
So to me, that's really the most important thing about a new beginning, is that every day I can come to God and, through all my circumstances, through all my faults, through all my wrongdoings, and start new, because God says, this is a new beginning for you, Frank. My son died for you, so you can have a new beginning.
Right.
So I wanted to combine all that together into this book.
So hearing more about your life story, it really ties into the Israelites' journey out of slavery into the Promised Land, difficulties, miracles, crises of faith.
Right? Yeah, I mean, you think about it. So God also, these people were slaves for 400 years, so they had the mentality of slave mentality. So they didn't know a different life.
Right.
Now God presents them a whole new life, right? A whole new freedom. And they walk through the Red Sea. They watch God drown the enemies and supply their riches to them. So they have this new beginning, right? So they're walking in this new beginning, but when times got tough, their mindset went back to the slave mentality.
Right.
And
Except for two men, right?
Right, Caleb and Joshua.
Right.
So
generals.
so it's a great metaphor because we're on this new beginning, right? And we're journeying towards the promised land. We have the vision of the life we want, the life that God has intended for us, but our old condition-based way of thinking holds us back.
Right.
We all want to go back to the comfort zone. So here I am, a 20-year-old man. It actually took me 30 years later to actually finally get to the life I wanted. And it was because I knew that it was all possible for me, but my circumstances, my old condition-based way of thinking kept me from making that bold move
Right.
to my promised land, to Kentucky.
So readers will take a lot of comfort reading your story and understanding that everybody, to some degree, they run into difficulties, they run into doubts, they run into delays. So we can all relate to circumstances holding us back. We become anxious about finances. We have health problems.
Right.
You had a very serious injury, a very catastrophic one. You actually had what we would call a near-death experience.
Right.
And so all those delays were understandable. How did you finally surmount these problems? How did you overcome the circumstances?
Well, I think I overcame them by finally deciding that nothing was going to stop me from advancing confidently towards the life I wanted. And so this is what I want to help people. I want to help them to stop looking at their circumstances to dictate what's possible for them. In this first podcast, I want people to realize that they're far greater than their circumstance.
Right.
They really are. And they don't have to go back to the condition-based way of thinking. They can implement the vision-based way of thinking. So they can journey towards the life they would love.
Right.
And, in the next podcast, we'll talk about how you create a vision and get in touch with your purpose so you can start advancing confidently towards the life you love. I also want to interject right here about learning of the Henry David Thoreau philosophy. So I did not know a lot about it up until just the last 3 or 4 years. So I went to further study the success principles with Mary Morrissey, and she is in California. She's been doing this work of power of positive thinking, changing your thoughts, changing your life. She's been doing it for 40 years. So in my studies as a life coach, we learn about Henry David Thoreau in the Concord Conversations. And that was on the Ralph Emerson's farm. And Henry David Thoreau was actually a caretaker there. And they had the mastermind group. They'd meet every Sunday, which was like a Bible study. And so they invited Henry David Thoreau into the conversations because he had a lot of good input. And so they're studying the laws of the universe, and they were studying, the Bible. And there's a Bible verse where they said, Jesus says, greater things you'll do than I. And that was kind of like intriguing to actually Henry David Thoreau. And he says, I don't just want to talk about this. I want to go out and I want to experience it. So that's when he decides that he is going to do an experiment on Walden Pond. Then he writes the book about it. So for 2 years, 2 months, 2 days, and 2 minutes, I believe it is, he actually studied the law of the universe. In the conclusion of his study, he has this famous quote. And his famous quote is, one advances confidently in the direction of his dream and endeavors to live the life he imagines. He will cross an invisible boundary, new things will start to occur, and he'll be met with success, an unexpected and common hour. So that has all the hidden codes of, the success principles. So if one advances confidently, right, in the direction of their dreams, new things will start to occur. They've made a decision that they're going to boldly go towards their life, and they're going to start to imagine themselves living that life.
Their vision.
Yeah, their vision, right? And then they're going to cross an invisible boundary. New things will start to occur that would never happen before. Same thing with me, right? I make this decision that I am going to move to Kentucky and nothing is going to stop me. I started to, imagine this life, what it could be like. It brought me life, right? And doors started to open, new things started to occur.
Right.
I made an action step. I called my friend Betsy and Kevin, said, I want to come to Kentucky. The doors opened up. I actually got to meet Penny Chenry, the person who had inspired me to make that decision. And then I'm actually living now in the township that Secretary stood at stud. I wanted to take that, what I've learned, and I could look back on my life, and I wanted to implement it in the book. And so in the beginning of the book, it talks about Henry David Thoreau, and it talks about, that quote. And then throughout the whole book, I explain how you can take your vision and your purpose and advance confidently towards it. And there's going to be these stumbling blocks. Same for the Israelites. They had stumbling blocks.
Yes.
And then we talk about Caleb and Joshua, the mindset of Caleb and Joshua. So they were able to get through the stumbling blocks because they had the vision of the life they wanted. They had this promise from God that they were going to live in the promised land. And that overrode any kind of doubt, any kind of circumstance, any kind of fear. And so in the book, step by step, I'm going to help you create the vision, find your purpose, then help you overcome your worry, your doubt, your fear, and your circumstances.
So they can cross that invisible boundary
Yes, exactly.
and achieve uncommon success.
Yeah, right. And so doors will start to open up for you that would have never happened before. I want to share that with you about today and close with that, like I said, the circumstances. So we all have our circumstances, right?
Yes.
So I want people to not look at their circumstances to dictate the decisions for the life they want. I want to help them go from the Israelite slave mentality to the Caleb and Joshua mindset. Keep that vision in front of you. Overcome the obstacles. Don't look at the circumstance to dictate your decisions,
Right.
and move confidently towards the life that God has intended for you.
Right.
That's my goal for this book. That's my goal for this podcast. I look forward to our next podcast, helping you find your purpose. And then we're going to help you step by step create a vision that serves that purpose.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this, and I thank everyone for their time today. I really look forward to talking with them very soon.
Me too. And I want to again remind listeners that Your New Beginning, a hope-filled guide to living out your purpose and reaching your promised land, is available right now on Amazon, and it's an excellent guide for making this journey themselves. And we'll talk about it some more
Thank
next
you.
time.
I really appreciate that, and we'll look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Frank.
All right, bye.
Bye.